Ladies and gentlemen, this is the Hank Cisco Show. Let's go.
Hi, I'm Barbara Ann Zippi, executive producer of Ciao Living Italian Style online and also in column form in the Delaware Valley Italian American Herald. So one of the things that's so close to Hank is that he loves his Italian news. So I thought I'd give you some news from Italy and some local things in case you're planning a trip to Italy, you know what to look out for. If you happen to be going to Sardinia though, which is a beautiful place where there's a lot of sand. Someone just tried to take away 90 pounds of sand from the beach and was arrested. So here, the sand in Sardinia is a treasured monument and is not to be taken. So if you don't want to end up with a 500 to 3,000 euro fine, don't take the sand in Sardinia. Last time we were talking about the cruise ships in the Venice terminals, and there's been a lot of confusion that people that are going to Venice right now are thinking, oh, our cruise ship isn't going to go there. They haven't actually diverted the cruise ships yet. From the main plaza. They're looking into diverting it to a different entrance of Venice. So the cruise ships will still give you departure time in Venice, which is one of the most beautiful cities in Italy. I'm partial to that one too. But if you ever get a chance to actually stay there overnight instead of on a cruise ship, it'll be an experience you won't forget. Speaking of Italians and liqueurs, I remember my dad loved a Negroni. And what's becoming much more popular today, we're starting to hear the word Campari, which is a brand favorite of Italians. It's an Italian liqueur, and they have a really interesting marketing outreach that they did. They took some Italian contemporary directors and did videos on different Campari drinks with a story. So you can find that under www.campari.com, Campari.com, red-diaries. Check it out because the old Italian things are seeming to start to come back again. Traveling into Rome from anywhere in the United States. Finally, the airport in Rome in the last 5 years has gotten one of the top 5 rankings out of all the airports. They used to be at the very end of the totem pole, and now they've actually moved up with a lot of improvements. So if you're going into Rome and that's where your entryway is in Italy, you'll have a very pleasant experience there. Another, I guess Italians like to drink because this is another news on something that's happening. Prosecco, for a long time, has started to surpass, or not a long time, has started to surpass the long-standing champagnes as a sparkling wine. Well, now you're going to have to look out for this new one. It's in the small Lombardy region, and they are using in the growing conditions in northern Italy, and let's see, they're calling it Franciacorta. Franciacorta. It's a northern Italian sparkling wine that is supposed to be giving the Prosecco a run for their money. So start to look for that on the shelves and give it a taste and see what you think. Now, we all love our DJs when they play it in weddings and bar mitzvahs and banquets. Well, there's an Italian DJ that's an astronaut, and he DJ'd in space. His name is DJ Astro Luca Parmigiano, and he performed a live DJ section before he left the space station, the International Space Station. He felt that there's 2 languages that are universal. One is mathematics, which certainly makes sense, and the other is the language science, mathematics, which is the science, and the other is music. He felt everyone understands and enables everyone to communicate through music and numbers. So we wish a lot of luck to DJ Astro Luca in space. Many of our friends, family, people are around crystals and ambers and the new age amethysts, and you hear a lot about stones. Well, they found a treasure trove in Pompeii, in the ruins of Pompeii. This is just recently. They found at a treasure chest that they're calling a sorcerer's treasure chest. And in it, they found crystals, ambers, amethyst stones, buttons made of bones, beetles from the Orient, amulets, dolls, bells, and even a tiny skull. And they were found in the area of Casa del Giardino. Now, this was one of the areas that was recently used to actually date when the eruption occurred. And these materials are dated back to 79 AD. So when your cousin's around the table coming up this Thanksgiving or Christmas or the holiday season and they start talking about astrology and all those other things that might be foreign to some and natural to others, just remember it dates all the way back there in Italy. And in the region of Salina, on the coast of Sicily, there's a wonderful new award-winning young Italian chef named Martina Caruso, and she's only 29 years old. And she was actually awarded the Female Chef of the Year award by the Italian Michelin Guide. So if you're paying a visit to Sicily and you have a chance, I would say she's one of the women that you should definitely try to find where her restaurant is and have a meal there. So that's our little bits of Italian news and what's happening here and abroad. And I'd like to take this time now to introduce you to our special guest. He is a Philadelphia legend. When I listen to Sunday Morning with Sid Mark is a Philadelphia legend. He is on the air 63 years. Well, the gentleman with us today is in the journalism business for 60 years. So he's given Sid a run for his money. And that's Stu Bykofsky, who many of you have read numerous columns of his in the Philadelphia Daily News and the Philadelphia Inquirer. Welcome to the Hank Cisco Show, Stu.
Hi, Barbara.
It's a pleasure to have you here.
Pleasure to be here. And as you were talking about Italy, you were actually bringing back some very fond memories for me, because I've been to Italy 4 times. Oh. And probably my favorite city in Italy is Venice, because of the beauty and because there's no place else on earth really like Venice.
You're right.
And the fact that there's no traffic in the city at all. As you know, you have to park your car outside where the cruise ships are also. Right. And it's just a wonderful place, a series of islands, and there's no straight streets there.
It's magical.
And you can't get lost, because even if you go down an alleyway and you get turned around, you don't know where you are. There's no point in having a map. You just walk until you hit water. Right. And once you hit the water, then you go one way or the other and you'll find where you are again.
And you'll end up finding your bed one way or another.
But the last time I was in Italy, it's probably more than 20 years ago, it was when Tom Foglietta was the ambassador.
Well, that must have been a special visit.
It was a special visit because I knew Tom from Philadelphia. Of course, I covered him when he was a congressperson here before he got appointed as the ambassador. And after he was the ambassador for a year, I talked to my boss about, hey, why don't you let me go to Italy and do a story on the ambassador's first year? And the Daily News never had money for travel, but they scraped some money together and they said, we can't cover the whole thing. So I dealt with the ambassador, and the ambassador said, why don't you stay with me at my official residence?
Wow.
Which I think was called La Taverna. It's a little mansion in the heart of the city.
In the heart of Rome.
On about 20 acres.
Wow.
With a wall all the way around it. So I was the guest of the ambassador, and I arrived at a very interesting time. The Italian government was falling, as it does every 3 or 4 years,
right,
as you probably know. So the ambassador had to go and call on a number of ministers, and I went with him. So I'm with the ambassador in his car. The American ambassador and I think 4 others get automatic police escorts, where you have a police car in front of you and a police car behind you, and they basically stop traffic so that you can go through. So we got to the ministry. I was not allowed into the meetings. I was kept out in the hall, but I kind of eavesdropped a little. It didn't do me a lot of good because they were speaking Italian and I don't. And then I was filing from there. And this is in the 70s. We didn't have all the electronics we have today,
Yes.
but we did have some rudimentary device for me to file to my office, except it wasn't working from Taverna, where I was staying. And I was desperate to find some way to do it, and the CIA did it for me.
Wow, special treatment.
They took my copy, they sent it to Langley on a closed circuit that only the CIA has, and then they transferred it and sent it to the Daily News in Philadelphia, which it was really a treat.
What a great way to get your column.
Yeah, you do feel, when you're with the ambassador, things happen.
Things happen.
Traffic stops, reservations at restaurants open. It's just like magic. And Tom was a really excellent ambassador for the United States.
He was, yes.
He loved Italy. He spoke Italian. The Italians took to him immediately because he was very down to earth. There were no airs about him at all. And I think the Italian people like that. And generally, one of the reasons I feel very comfortable in Italy is that they just love Americans. Everybody has a relative here. You feel more at home, I felt as an American, more at home in Italy than I did in, say, England or certainly France or Germany.
Yes. They're very welcoming and very warm.
It's my European home away from home.
And it's nice to hear because as I live Italian every day, with my grandparents coming from the same village in Italy when they all came over. And yet, I find a little bit of Italian in everybody. It just seems that there's a little love of Italy or their food or their culture in every nationality. So
I've been told I'm Hebrew-Zays.
okay,
Yeah,
Hebrew
yeah.
says that's a good one.
Mostly Jewish,
Look
but
at
a little
Sid.
Italian.
Most people would think Sid Mark was Italian with how he loved Sinatra. He's an amazing man. I think actually he says Frank Sinatra knighted him Italian, if I'm not mistaken. But I was going to ask you about your career in journalism and interesting stories, and you picked one. When we talk about filing a story today, everybody thinks they pick up their device, which is a walking computer, and file things. But years ago, would you just say a little bit about the actual process that you had to do to file a story?
Well, okay, so when you were talking about Italy, it brought back this wonderful memory I had of my last visit to Rome. And I was just there for like 4 or 5 days, and just Rome only, because that's what I was there to do. I didn't get the vacation. Earlier than that, in 1977, I was in Israel. It was my first visit to Israel, and I was on my vacation. I was in Tel Aviv getting ready to take a tour of the country that would have taken 4 or 5 days. I get a call from my office saying Anwar Sadat, the president of Egypt, was going to go to Israel. Now, this was known already. I knew
and
it. It was planned. And this
was your office, the Philadelphia Daily News?
The Philadelphia Daily News was calling me. They said, no, it's been moved up. He's going to arrive tomorrow in Jerusalem. Do you want to cover it for us? And I said, yes, of course I want to cover it, but I have a tour bus leaving without me, so I'll stay for the Sadat visit, but then you, Daily News, you have to send me back at some time in the future so I can take my vacation. And they agreed.
That's a good barter.
I think I was the only Philadelphia journalist there. I was at the King David Hotel in Jerusalem. And I mean, this was earth-shaking. The Arab world wasn't even speaking to Israel at this point.
Right.
And now you're having the leader of the largest Arab nation, who was at war with Israel, to come and pay a visit to pave the way for peace. So he was also staying at the King David Hotel. His security, the Egyptian security. Now, security people surrounding, say, our president are never particularly friendly. I've been around presidents, I've been in the same hotel, and if you think you're going to chat up the Secret Service guys, and now women, you are not.
Okay.
They are not going to talk to you. They are not going to be friendly. The Egyptian Secret Service officers, not only were they friendly, they were terrified. You could see it in their eyes. They were terrified. They were in the, not then the official capital. They were in the capital of the enemy, and they probably thought they were going to die at any moment, and they were surrounded by unfriendly people. So I went to the meetings. I covered everything, and the way I filed my story was to write it out. I did have a portable typewriter with me. I wrote it out on a portable typewriter, about this big.
That's big.
Yeah, small.
Suitcase.
Yeah, well, I had one one on my desk at home was like that. So I did have, it was a small Olivetti. Oh, Italian again, which I only used for travel. So I would type out my story and count up the length. You would count the number of words and do a calculation to know how long it would be in inches. I was given 20 inches to fill. And then I got on the telephone and I called Philadelphia, and I dictated the story over the phone to the Night City editor, who took it down, did some light editing on it, and put it through. And there's a, the 6 or 8 hour time difference too. So you had to calculate, but that's how it was done. There was one other way of doing it. If you typed it out, you had something that looked like this.
Right.
The way photographs were transmitted at the time was they were put on a roller, an electronic roller, and they would spin, and it would be translated electronically through wires to the home city, where it would come out as a picture. Again, you could do the same thing with text. You could treat it like a picture, put it on one of those rollers and transmit it.
But it still needs to be retyped
at
the other end.
That's right. The other end would still have to be retyped, and if it was a little blurry, it couldn't be. I did not choose to use that. I chose to call Will Williams, who had been a submariner during World War II. He was the Night City editor, and he was an incredibly plaid shirt wearing every night, unflappable human being. Nothing you could tell him would get a rise out of him. Nothing. I would dictate to him. He was a touch typist. I could dictate to him almost if I was speaking at this level.
Right.
He would take it down. He would read it back to me, and then I'd go to sleep.
That is amazing. Now, in a career as a journalist, you've seen all this technology from practically nothing to what it is today. How did you decide to be a journalist?
Well, it it was sort of thrust on me. When I was in elementary school and high school, I grew up in New York, and I was in a science high school, not the Bronx High School of Science, which you may have heard of. I was in the #2 school at that time, which was Peter Stuyvesant High School, male only, #2 to Bronx High School of Science.
So you're
now
a
it's
New York
#1.
transplant to Philadelphia.
That's correct.
Okay.
Like I knew Philadelphia needed help, like Ed Rendell, so I decided to come here, and other New Yorkers who have been successful in Philadelphia.
Right.
So my goal was to, you were talking about the DJ astronaut.
Yes.
I had an ambition of being an astronaut. And then I was told there were a couple of things wrong with that. Number one, you had to be a college graduate, which I wasn't at the time. Number two, you needed 20/20 eyesight. Number three, you couldn't be over 6 feet tall.
Okay.
Because these guys, think about it, at the time they were smaller, they had to get into this
Small
little cockpit.
capsules.
I also flunked physics a few times, so that was sort of a black mark on my career to go into science. And in my junior year in high school, I flunked every course that I took, including gym, except for English. I got a 95.
Wow.
And I didn't even like English. So I kind of got an inkling that I wasn't going to do so well in science, but I might think about English. And I always kind of liked writing. I always could do it. So there are people who can open their mouth and sing beautifully, or dance, or draw. I've always wanted to draw. Can't draw worth a damn. What I can do is write.
Well, you can write. Your columns cover the history of the city. And many times you're a controversial writer.
Yeah.
You don't always take the favorite. You really bring out the underdog. What made you decide to do that?
I don't really calculate what my position should be. My overarching philosophy in life, the way I was raised, is you do the right thing and you obey the law. So that's where I start out from. So if the subject is, say, immigration, my grandparents, God rest their souls, were immigrants.
As mine, all four.
They came here legally. I bless their memory because they did that. I had the privilege of being born as an American. And people talk about white privilege. Let me tell you something. Anybody born in this country has privilege. There's all kinds of privilege. There's tall privilege. There's pretty privilege. Everybody has some kind of privilege, and everybody has some kind of a black mark too. But my road to journalism opened, actually, my first job in journalism was in 1959. I had entered Brooklyn College at night because I didn't have grades good enough to get me into a day school. The municipal college system was free. My first job was a copy boy at the World Telegram and Sun, and that was in February of 1959. And my career ended in July of 2019, so it's 60 years.
60.
As to the controversy.
Ending.
And,
Yes,
well,
as to the
it
controversy.
actually, it just sort of took a new track. The controversy is I want to do the right thing. I was talking about immigration, so I am 110% for legal immigration. I am completely opposed to illegal immigration. Come here, you're welcome, do it the right way. So that's controversial in this city because this is a sanctuary city.
Yes.
Sanctuary cities are illegal. The mayor is breaking the law,
Yes.
in my opinion. You can be, and there have been, people who have been convicted of felonies who are foreigners, who are here illegally, and he will not turn them over to the authorities. He lets them go. One got let go 3-4 years ago, and he raped a child. He's still here. So I don't think of myself as being controversial. I just say obey the law. And in this city, for some people, that's very controversial.
Well, having it put into writing and having your name put on it and published, a lot of people don't put themselves out there like that. And as a journalist, you have done that and recorded historic points of view through all your years. One of the funny stories you have to tell us, though, with all the seriousness that you do, because you've covered so many things, politics and sports and crime, is your Hollywood story with Joan Collins.
Well, that unfortunately was not much of a story. I was the TV critic of the Daily News between 1980 and 1985. And the TV critics from the bigger papers anyway, twice a year would go to Los Angeles for presentations that were put on by the networks. You would see the new series that were coming up that hadn't been released yet. You would get to interview the stars of the series. You would interview network executives if you were a serious person covering a serious topic, because television, part of it is entertainment, but the other part of it is business. You really have to cover both. And with some people, really big stars, you'd get an interview with maybe 200 people in the room. With people who are up and coming or not stars at all, you could pull them aside and say, I'd like to interview them, meet them for lunch, and talk to them one-on-one. The people who are in between, sometimes you'd get these smaller interviews where there may be 20 or 30 people there. So I'm in a room with 20 other journalists, and we were sitting at a sort of a rectangular table, and Joan Collins was in Dallas? Falcon Crest? No, which
Dynasty.
Dynasty, I'm sorry.
Dynasty.
You could see how much I enjoyed those shows. I never watched any. I had to watch them once as a TV critic when they came on.
Right.
But after, that's right, it was Morgan Fairchild was in Falcon Crest, I think, and then Miss Gray was in Dallas, and okay, so
Joan Collins was in
Dynasty. So this interview starts, and I'm about 3 seats down from her, and I have my notepad, and we have a tape recorder going, and I'm looking at her periodically, and every time I look at her, she's staring at me dead in the face.
Wow.
And so after the third time, I started getting a little nuts, and what the? I figured, first I'm imagining something. She is just staring at me and not looking at anybody else in the room, not that I could see. And to tell you the truth, it unnerved me. The interview ends, we go out, and I'm going to the coffee samovar to get some coffee, and she's there. And she introduces herself as if I wouldn't know who she was, and says something like, it was really nice being interviewed by you. And I said, wait a minute, there's 20 other people in the room. And she says, well, my publicist, and walks away. Which is basically like giving you her phone number, because they never give out their phone numbers. And I just thought I was having an out-of-body experience. This is
I think she was coming on to you.
I am not such an egotist as I would have thought that. I'm thinking, she's married. She's married.
She's Joan Collins.
And then 2 weeks later, you find out she's no longer married. She had just broken up with her husband. And, she had a reputation as being, available most of the time.
Right.
So...
you were a target.
I missed my... I can't say this would have happened, but I missed my chance.
Well, it was nice to be picked in the crowd.
If I was, yes. But it's a nice memory anyway. But I'll tell you what, I still think of the way she had beautiful eyes and beautiful makeup. It still kind of unnerves me a little.
Oh, well, your career is an amazing one. And in journalism today, one of the people that we have coming up that was a favorite of journalists, negative and positive, was Frank Rizzo. Mm-hmm. And Frank, this October 23rd, is going to be 99, celebrated his 99th birthday. And Hank Cisco, the tradition with Hank Cisco in the show is actually Hank started as a policeman and then went into a detective in this Norristown area and ended up as a pallbearer for Frank Rizzo and always tries to do something at the foot of the statue. And as an Italian that grew up in South Philly, St. Monica's, that's Frank Rizzo's parish, Rosewood Street, area. I just have a lot of admiration for the man and what he did in understanding. If anybody has ever seen Sal Antonio's book, is a real nice history of what Philadelphia was like at the time. Mm-hmm. So you covered him. You were at the Daily News when he was mayor. Mm-hmm. What were your impressions of Rizzo as a mayor in the city at the time that it was?
Well, I actually covered him over a really long period, not so much when he was mayor, but after he was mayor, maybe toward the tail end of his second term, and then later after he was mayor. But first, I know without looking or without having to be reminded that Frank Rizzo's birthday is October 23rd, because that's my mother's birthday.
Wow.
And my mother would be 99 as well. So my mother and Frank Rizzo were born on the same day. My mother was not always pleased to be told about that because my mother and father were both socialists, both wild liberals, and what they knew about Frank Rizzo, they got through the media, and what they got through the media, by and large, was not kind. Not always inaccurate, but certainly not kind, and frequently inaccurate. There was more to Frank Rizzo than, the Cisco kid. Hey, hi, Hank.
Right.
The other Cisco kid, being, the tough police commissioner and also the tough mayor. One other connection I have with him was he was running for mayor in 1991. In 1991, I was writing basically the entertainment or gossip column, and Ed Rendell was running. Ed Rendell at that time had a reputation of being kind of a party boy, a frat boy. He had been DA. He lost a couple of other races. He hadn't accomplished much, and he wasn't taken seriously as a candidate, even though Rizzo was running now as a Republican, and Republicans never won in Philadelphia. People were thinking he still had his troops. He did own certain sections of the city. And this was before South Philadelphia moved to Washington Township in New Jersey. So there were still a lot of Rizzo loyalists in the river wards, in the Northeast. Basically, I'd have to say, in the white parts of town. He didn't have this kind of support in the black community or the Hispanic community, that's for sure. There's no denying that. So he could have won. So in 1991, I decided to figuring, well, Rizzo's not that great, and Rendell's not that great. I could probably do a better job, and I launched a campaign for me to be mayor of Philadelphia. When I wrote it in the paper, it was kind of a satire, and had dozens of people volunteering to go out and get signatures for me so I could get on the ballot. And they did it. I think you needed 3,000 signatures to get on the ballot. I had 5,000.
And so you were on the ballot?
No, I didn't go on the ballot because when it was looking like I was going to be on the ballot, so a little civil war broke out at the Daily News. And there was also another guy.
Oh, that's right. You would be with the paper. You couldn't.
I wasn't going to resign. I wasn't
Right,
going to
of
quit the
course
paper.
not.
No, I was. There was a third gentleman running whose name escapes me now. He's an African American candidate running as an independent. So there were four. The political writer, Ron Goldwyn at the Daily News, goes to the editor, Zach Stolberg, and he says, how can I cover this campaign if one of our own staff is in it? How do I do that? And so Stolberg called me in. There were another couple of other editors involved, and we were all discussing this. And I said, look, Ron, you cover Rendell and Rizzo and the other guy. Dennis, I can't remember his name. It'll come to me. You cover them. I'll write about myself. Don't worry about covering me. And Ron, this is really unorthodox. And I'll tell you something. No other newspaper in America would have considered this even for a second. You couldn't imagine doing this if you were at the Enquirer or the New York Times. This is not something you do. But the Daily News was always different. It was always a fun paper. It was always looking for some kind of an angle. And while we were having the discussion, Ron says, Stu could actually siphon off enough votes from somebody to affect the outcome of the election. And just then, Chuck Stone is walking by. Chuck Stone was a senior editor of the paper. He was also a columnist. Very, very outstanding, well-known, knowledgeable African-American columnist. He was the guy, whenever there was a riot in the jail or a penitentiary, they'd call for Chuck Stone. If some guy was accused of murder or something, he wanted to surrender to the police, but he didn't trust the police, Chuck Stone would bring him in. He had an amazing reputation in the city, and it made you humble to walk down Broad Street with Chuck Stone, because every third person would be saying, hey Chuck, hey Chuck, hey Chuck. And I thought I was hot stuff.
Well, I have to find out because we have to wrap it up. Did you make the ballot or did you stay off?
The editor of the Daily News said, I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm going to tell you this. If you're on the ballot, it will create problems for me. And what I knew was I had to kiss one ass at the Daily News, and it was a narrow one, and it was his, so I did not have myself put on the ballot.
Well, we almost had Mayor Stu Bykofsky as a potential candidate for the city of Philadelphia. Maybe we could get him back on the ballot again one of these upcoming elections. Stu, you could come back 2 and 3 times. The stories have to be amazing about the city. So if you have a chance, look up Stu's archives on the website, because all his columns are there. He's also got an active Facebook page, and he's still communicating with everybody. I'd like to thank you all for joining us. On October 23rd at 12:30 in the afternoon, we will be at the steps of the Frank Rizzo statue on JFK Boulevard at the Municipal Services Building with Dom Giordano from Talk Radio as the MC, and Captain Lou Cavalieri from the Navy Yard will be joining us, and also Frank Giordano from the Philly Pops. And we'll be celebrating Rizzo's 99th birthday. So until then, see you, and thanks for joining us today.